I want to share with you some tips I have on how to pick a speech topic, and probably maybe even more importantly, problems I've seen with people when they pick a speech topic. Now, a lot of this comes from coaching individuals who are competing in the international speech competition and Toastmasters, where they have the ability to pick whatever topic they want to talk about. There are situations where you're required to speak on a specific subject because of your job or an event that you're speaking at. And in that case, you are required to speak on that subject. And there will be some other tips I have on how to connect on that. This is where you have 5 to 7 minutes or 10 minutes to stand in front of an audience and speak to them. What are you going to say? There's been a lot of people that I've coached that are trying to speak to something that they feel the audience is going to find fascinating, or they feel the audience is going to like the subject. And when they do that, they actually are assigning the audience as the author of the speech. And one of the key things in being a great speaker is authenticity, is that you're being authentic. And the word authenticity has the same root word as author. That means you have to be the author of your speech. You have to come up with what you're going to say. Another point a lot of people have struggled with is they want something that's sensational. Well, again, who determines if the subject is sensational, you or the audience? The audience determines if your speech was sensational. You don't determine that. So you're trying to make it sensational so the audience has this reaction to it. The wow. That happens with the audience. A lot of times the best speeches, the most sensational speeches, are phenomenally sincere and phenomenally authentic speeches. And I know David Brooks, Mark Brown, a lot of the other world champions have said the same thing. It's better to be sincere than sensational, because sincerity really connects with the audience. And sincere comes from a root word in Latin meaning clean. There's no other ulterior motive in it. When you're trying to be sensational, you're trying to put something out there. You're not saying, I want to be sensational. You're trying to put something out there that people say, oh, that was sensational. It's not a clean approach because you have an ulterior motive, which is to be sensational. The other thing is to tell somebody else's story, which I see this all the time. We were inspired by somebody else's story, so I'm going to share with you the story of this guy because it inspired me. Well, again, it's his story. Now, here's the simplicity. Your story is the best story to tell because it is your story. You're the speaker. And with that, it doesn't have to be a big sensational story. It's better to be simple than sensational. So we'll put this: simple and sincere trumps sensational. So you don't want something that is, you want something that everybody can relate to. So when I look at speeches I want to give and how I'm going to pick topics, or when I'm looking at a speech that I read and I'm reading the speech and I'm going through it, we're coaching the speech, I'm looking at, well, what is the real message in here that the person, what's the experience? And I'll talk to the person I'm coaching and I said, well, what lesson based on this story or this experience you had, what lesson have you personally learned that's affected your life in real, that you use every day? Because of that experience, you have this lesson. And you want other people to get that lesson without going through that experience. But you want them to have the lesson because it's going to improve their life. So what have you learned yourself about life that you can give somebody else insight into that you truly feel is going to help them? Now, again, with a sincere, authentic approach, you're going to connect with the person in a stronger fashion than you would with a sensational, flamboyant approach, trying to overwhelm them on how incredible this is. Now, with that too, people relate more to our failures than they do to our successes. So to stand up and talk about how successful we were at something, it's better to talk about how we struggled and we finally came up with a solution. And I'll get into this. I have a thing, I should never be the hero in my own story, because when I'm telling sort of the audiences, let me tell you how smart I am, let me tell you how great I am, I'm the hero of my own story. Even if I am the hero of my own story, I will assign it to somebody else in the speech. I got the idea from somebody else and they inspired me to actually take this action. The other thing that I want to just hit on in picking your topics, and this is a major thing I've seen in so many speeches, A speech should deliver one clear takeaway. Message clarity cannot be overstated. A clear takeaway, not 4 or 5 takeaways, or not none. I've seen speeches that have no message. I've seen messages or speeches that have 5 messages in it. You need to design that speech so it delivers your message, which has clarity to it, and the audience can easily understand the single concept you want to get across. So when I'm looking for speech topics, I'm looking for the simplicity and something that I have sincerity on that I can deliver, with the desire to help the audience do better or understand something about life or something about handling life in some capacity. And I'm not worried about that this is what I think the audience is going to want to hear, or that it's going to be sensational to them. All I want is, let me share this experience with you. And you can take it or leave it. But this is my experience, and this is what happened, and I think that you're going to be better off with it than without it. You know, it's sort of that type of an attitude on it. And it's amazing, each and every person I've talked to has thousands of these messages. You just have a hard time finding them. I'll talk about how to do that later. With this, I want to share one quick example. I was coaching a guy one time, and the story was about his grandmother had fallen or something, and she lived alone in this house, and the family decided she shouldn't live alone anymore. So they put her in this full care nursing facility, and she got healed up, but she didn't want to be in the nursing home. She wanted to live at her house. So the grandmother actually figured out, they had passcodes on the different doors and stuff. And so she would walk with the nurses and she'd memorize the passcodes. And she called one of her friends, and her friend had lost her license, which she was sold, but she still had her car. And she arranged to escape from the nursing home. And so on Sunday morning, they had a church service. So everybody's at church. She goes through and she escapes from the nursing home, runs out in the horseshoe, turn around, and her friend pulls in the car, 2 old ladies without a license, and they drive off. And then the nursing home has to report back to the family that grandma escaped from the nursing home. And she makes a deal with them. She won't tell them where she is until they promise her that she can stay in her house. And they make the deal and she stays in her house. And then he tells the story about grandma escaping from the nursing home. And he says, if you ever run into a situation in your life, remember my grandmother escaped from a nursing home. You can get through it. So I got this, and this story is about, it's a great story. It's a personal family story, but it has nothing to do with him. There's nothing connected to this gentleman who's giving this story. And so I'm saying, well, that's a great story about your grandma. Did that story ever inspire you to change your life in any way? And he thinks for a second and he goes, well, I was addicted to drugs, and I knew I could get through it because I knew my grandmother escaped from the nursing home. You were addicted to drugs? And it turned out it wasn't like cocaine or heroin, but it was steroids and some other drugs, but he got addicted to it. And he said, yeah, he was having heart problems, and he went in and they were going to knock him out and give him an angioplasty where they run the thing up through your heart. And they gave him the shot in the arm to knock him out. And he said, he went, oh, that's good. I'm going, here's your speech, man. So he talked, we changed the speech around. So he talked about how he's addicted by drugs, and grandma was a hero. And he talked about how his grandmother inspired him to get over his drug habit, because if she at 89 years old could escape from a nursing home, he could get over drugs. Now that's just a way of taking the story and spinning it around to how was it personal to you? So this has probably gone on a little longer than I intended, but I hope you found it worthwhile, and I look forward to talking to you soon.